Good evening. My name is John H. and I am an alcoholic. Welcome to the Code Blue Big Book Action Seminar. What we're going to do in this seminar, guys, is we're going to go through the first 164 pages of our big book, our Guide to Freedom, and we're going to do exactly what it says. I myself am no big book guru. I am no spiritual wonder man. I'm just a simple drunk who was almost dead from the disease when a couple recovered alcoholics took me through the book. I did the work, and it saved my life. Now, as a result of that, I try to pass on what has been so freely given to me. Now, I borrow heavily from the Joe and Charlie Big Book Weekend tapes. I borrow heavily from that smartass Clancy. I borrow from Chuck C. I borrow from all of the giants who have gone before me. So please, get yourself a big book, large print I prefer, a highlighter and a pen, and bring your willingness. Get ready to change your life. Thanks for listening. This is the time, however, that people start to drop out. Because of the fourth step is coming up. During the 1950s, a man by the name of Max C., now dead, started a group in Winnipeg, Manitoba called the Golden Slippers. The group was a back to the basics of the big book kind of group, especially for those people who could not stay sober for any length of time. The group took a bunch of chronic slippers and walked them through the steps, taking the action exactly as laid out by the first 100 men and women who wrote the basic textbook Alcoholics Anonymous. This is not your typical thanks for sharing kind of AA meeting, nor is it like any seminar. Participants are asked to do all 12 steps as laid out in our basic textbooks. One or more of the people who have done this work before will be guides to lead you through the instructions in our basic book using a dictionary published at about the same time as the book Alcoholics Anonymous to help us better understand the directions as they were written by the first 100 men and women. We ask every participant to commit to the entire process. Though we read and study the AA Big Book, this group is not limited to members of AA. We who have participated in these groups before have come to understand that these sessions make us much better sponsors. We can now lead people through the steps exactly as given to us by those who have gone before, unfettered and unchanged. In addition to being a boot camp for sponsors, we also feel this is especially valuable to those who have been through some sort of treatment or rehab and have been in effect left off at 3 or 5. Recovery requires that we do all 12 steps. We recover in AA by taking the steps, and if we don't take the action, as described in our basic textbook, we might not recover. These study and action sessions will guide you through the steps precisely as the first 100 men and women laid them down. These are back to the basic sessions, accepting the simple kit of spiritual tools that's been laid at our feet. Let's open with a set-aside prayer. God, please let me set aside everything I think I know about sobriety, life, and you, so that I may be open to a new experience. All right, so and before I forget, I'm going to give you, because I know Andrew has to sneak out of here right away to go to the airport. Everybody, if you could, please get a 12 and 12. And before we meet next week, read the fourth step in the 12 and 12. I forgot to tell you, we were supposed to do that last week to familiarize ourselves with the basic instincts of life. We are going to talk about those today briefly, but please get that done, because next week we're gonna jump right into the fourth step. So, and I always say, if I'm used to people dropping out, not only in Code Blue, but also people that I sponsor on an individual basis when we get to the fourth step. And I'll talk about, I think, some of the reasons why that happens next week when we get started. So a little bit about what we've done so far, right? Let's try to get into Bill Wilson's head and see what he's trying to do with the big book here. He starts out with the doctor's opinion, and what he does in the doctor opinion is he tells us what the problem is. So he talks about the allergy of the body. Once we start drinking, we can't stop. And the obsession of the mind. Once we stop drinking, we cannot stay stopped, right? Then he goes on to chapter 1, Bill's story. So he gives us alcoholics an example of somebody who has the problem. We see the progression of the disease, and ultimately we see how somebody's able to recover. In chapter 2, there is a solution. Bill, obviously, he shows us the solution. The problem being powerlessness, or powerless, the solution being power. Now, there's two powers, the power of the fellowship and the power of the vital spiritual experience. And he's saying if we can combine both of those powers, we're going to be able to effect a recovery from this disease. Chapter 3, more about alcoholism, he shows us what's going to happen to us if we do not find that power and we do not have that vital spiritual experience. The insanity is going to return. We're going to drink again. And, I don't know about you guys, but for me, to drink again is to die. Chapter 4, we agnostics, is going to show us a power that we can begin to live with, that we can make a decision about, right? Get a power actually that can help us in our lives, not some strange mystical thing that might be out there, but rather something that can actually help us in our everyday lives. So Bill is thinking, hey, I've given them all the information they need to see the problem. Step 1, to see the solution. Step 2, and to accept the idea of that solution. So this brings us to how it works. And essentially how it works is what actions can we take to find that power that is going to remove our obsession to drink and give us a good life. While Bill was writing the book, as we know, the fellowship, they started out with 40 people. They insisted on seeing exactly what he wrote. So he would write pages, and he would send copies of the pages to Akron, and he would send copies of the pages to the New York City group. And these groups forced changes on Bill, right? And they said, Bill, this is not your book, this is to be our book, right? And Bill began to see a definite difference between the Akron group and the New York City group. In Akron, they were led by Dr. Bob. They wanted a book about God. They had no problem with religion and even the Bible. And they said, Bill, you give us a book with God and plenty of biblical references. We'd love it. And the New York City group, they wanted a book dealing with the mind only, right? The mind itself, and very little spirituality and no religion whatsoever. The New York City group was led by a fellow named Jimmy the Atheist, right? Jimmy the Atheist, Jimmy Burwell. And he said, get that God stuff out of the book. I do not want to see that. So Bill is sitting there and he's thinking, my God, how can I satisfy everybody? Because at this point, we're getting some Protestants, we're getting some Catholics, some Jews, and a sprinkling of Muslims. And Bill was having very much difficulty in the writing of how it works. So what we're going to do is we're going to read the big book for a little bit, and then we're going to read the original how it works when we get to that point. So let's go to how it works. This is where the instructions, he starts to give us the instructions. So we are on page 58. So before we start reading, at the top of the page, let's write intentions versus actions. Intentions vs. period actions. Okay? What does that mean, right? Because we all have the best of intentions, right? But at the end of the day, we're going to see what our priorities are by what we have done. Not by what we wanted to do or what we intended to do, but actually what we did, right? Intentions versus actions. I got a guy that's working at the tile shop, and he works in our warehouse, and he can't get sober, and he was all gung-ho to do the code blue, and then on the very first day he had forgot that it was, we talked about it for weeks every day, and he forgot about it and decided to work. Well, anyways, this guy, he's about to get fired. He just got an apartment, and he's got two young boys. He's going to get fired. He's going to be homeless again because he had good intentions, but he did not take any actions. He's going to be out on the street. Probably tomorrow they're going to probably let him go because he can't stay sober. Let's also write at the top of the page, dedicate 1 day a week to work with sponsees. Dedicate 1 day a week to work with sponsees, right? That's what my sponsor taught me to do. Dedicate 1 day a week to work with sponsees. And you don't need to write this, right? But what I had to do is I had to get away because I came in and out of these rooms. I had to get away from the could nots and the would nots. Let's not go to that 4-step seminar, John. Let's go to a movie. Let's go to the football game, right? I had to get away from those people, and I had to get to the coulds and woulds, right? And I had to start hanging out with them in order for me to recover. So, all right, so we're going to start reading. And what I used to do, right, in my naivete, I used to have people cross out rarely and write never, right? So never have we seen a person fail, but don't do that, right? Because here I am, I'm constantly learning and reading more stuff. And I'm reading A New Pair of Glasses by Chuck C. And he said Bill did not want to write never there. Because Bill said, if I write never there, do you know how many alcoholics are going to say, I'm going to prove myself the exception to that rule? So he said he knew the alcoholic mind. So Bill did not want to put never there. He wanted rarely, right? So I'd been wrong about that for a few years till I read Chuck C. So we're not going to cross out rarely and write never, even though it's in my book. So rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Highlight followed our path, draw a little line, and write the 12 steps. That's the 12 steps, right? I mean, our path is not 90 meetings in 90 days, but 90 meetings in 90 days is going to help support us while we follow our path and while we do the 12 steps. Those who do not recover, highlight, are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Stop highlighting there. So off to the left, you can write in prison, okay? And that could, because remember, this book came out in 1939, and they didn't have any books or meetings in prison. So one of the cannots was somebody who might be in prison or an institution, because they couldn't get a hold of people or this book. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest. Circle the word honest. And next to it, write, if you can't be honest, you are a cannot. Right? And again, I'm going to be going fast today, and you can always get on Code Blue Big Book, get onto YouTube, type that in, and you can go to the last session I did, although I'm going to have different stuff in this one. So if you cannot be honest with yourself, you are a cannot. There are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which, highlight, demands rigorous honesty. And again, circle that word honesty again. We're seeing that word come up again and again here. Their chances are less than average. There are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders. Next to mental disorders, let's write depression and schizophrenia. You know, and if you don't know how to spell it, just put skits. Depression and schizophrenia next to the mental disorders. But many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Circle the word honest again. So goodness me. They're telling us that we've got to be honest primarily with ourselves, right? Primarily with ourselves. And if we're honest with ourselves, we're going to be able to be honest with other people. Highlight the next two lines. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. So above what happened, write solution. I heard speakers for years, and I didn't understand what they were talking about when they talked about the solution. I was completely baffled. I would go back to your drinking story, right? So I didn't know what the solution was. So also next to that, we're going to write when you speak. That's what we do when we speak, okay? What we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now, okay? And then also next to that, two lines that we highlighted, we're going to write give message of hope. We want to give people that come into these rooms the message of hope. I mean, you've all seen the great speakers, right, where they talk about their drinking, career maybe for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and then the other 45 minutes is what happened, and they're giving a message of hope to people that things can get better. If you have decided you want what we have, underline, and are willing to go to any length to get it, just that little bit, then you are ready to take certain steps. Okay, so after take certain steps, write ask sponsee. Ask sponsee. And what that means is we're going to stop here and we're going to say, are you willing to go to any length for this? Okay, because if they're not willing to go for any length for this, it's probably not going to work. So I just wrote ask sponsee next to are you willing to go to any length, right? At some of these we balked. Highlight the next sentence. We thought we could find an easier, softer way. Just that little line. Next to that, we're going to write must get sponsor. Must get sponsor. That's one thing I would never do, right? Must get sponsor. I was afraid that they might want me to do something that would make me uncomfortable, right? And plus, I was full of fear and thought that there's no way that somebody else could help me, right? But we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Highlight to the end of the paragraph. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. So highlight that and circle the word nil. Okay? They're saying we get nothing, right? So, you know what, man? I'm going to go to a meeting here and there, and I'm going to read the book now and again. But we're holding on to our old ideas, thinking that maybe we can handle this thing. We're going to get absolutely nothing. At the bottom of the page, let's write testimony of first 100. That's what this book is. It's the testimony of first 100 people who recovered. And we got to remember that this book was written by more than just one person. So, testimony of first 100. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us. But there is one, circle one, who has all power. That one, circle one, is God. Circle God. And then highlight, may you find him now. Okay, so may you find him now. That means presently / immediately. That means right here, right now in this room with us together, right? Find him right now. Not tomorrow, but right now. Highlight the next 5 words. Half measures availed us nothing. There it is again. Hey man, I'm going to 3 meetings a week. I'm reading a couple of pages out of the book every day. I'm even calling this guy, but we're not going through the book and we're not doing the work, right? I'm doing half measures. It doesn't say half measures availed us half stuff. It says half measures availed us nothing. And I can tell you guys that for 20 years, I even would go to a meeting every night. And I would do anything, but I would not get a sponsor and I would not work these steps, and it availed me nothing. I did have bouts of sobriety, but I certainly had no peace of mind ever. We stood at the turning point. Underline the next sentence. We asked his protection with care and complete abandon. Okay, so highlight that, and after that write prayer without reserve / total surrender. Prayer without reserve / total surrender. You know, and I think I was really lucky because when I had that week alone in my apartment after I got out of the emergency room and I was running out of everything, thinking about taking my life the best way I could, I finally cried out and asked God for help. Please help me, right? And, that kept me going until I finally became willing 6 months later to start on the work. I still don't know how I stayed sober that long. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the steps. And on one side, you can write so on the right, write principles. I'm going to give you the principle for each step. And then I'm going to give you the page number where conventional wisdom says that you can find that step the most. Although these steps are sprinkled all over the book. But we're going to give you a page number. So, 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol. Honesty, page 30. Honesty, page 30. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Hope, 47. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. Underline, as we understood him. That's going to be 63, faith. 63, faith. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 64, courage. Page 64, courage. admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 75, integrity. 75, integrity. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 76, willingness. 76, willingness. Humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. 76, humility. 76, humility. Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 76, brotherly love. Brotherly love. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 76, we're going to give you two principles: forgiveness / justice. That's why I call that fella that's been coming here named Justice, I call him Step 9. Forgiveness / justice. 10, continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. We're going to go page 84, and again we've got two principles. Discipline / perseverance. Discipline / perseverance. Did I say 84? I must have. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God, underline, as we understood Him, right? Italics. Praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. Page 85, spiritual awareness. Okay, we're going to write something at the bottom of the page too. This and so the stuff we write, we're going to discuss with our sponsee. So let's write: steps are not suggested. Done by first 100, we must do. Steps are not suggested. Done by first 100, we must do. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that when we read the original, how it works. Steps are not suggested. Done by first 100, we must do. Notes here. I'm dropping papers all over the place. Okay. 12. Having had a spiritual awakening, underline awakening, and above it write experience. Okay. And because remember, that's the only word in the 12 steps that Bill ever changed. He changed experience to awakening because he had an experience which was suddenly and quickly, but the vast majority of us have an awakening which takes place over time by the working of the steps, right? Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics, underline, and to practice these principles in all our affairs, and double underline all. We're going to go service, page 89. Service, page 89. Many of us exclaimed, underline, what an order, I can't go through with it. Next to that, write out loud, right? We're reading that with our sponsor. We're going to say that really loud. Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. Okay, underline these principles, a little arrow out, and go the steps. The steps and the principles are synonymous. They're synonymous. Bill in step 12, they asked him about it. A spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. He said it wouldn't sound very good if I wrote it as the result of these steps. We tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these steps in all of our affairs. So he put the word principles in. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing, underline willing, to grow along spiritual lines. And then underline the next three lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. And again, right where we started out with the principles, draw a little line and write the steps. That's very important that we understand. The principles and the steps are synonymous, right? And they're a set of spiritual instructions. Our description of the alcoholic, above that write doctor's opinion. Doctor's opinion. Allergy, obsession. The chapter to the agnostic, above that write 4. Chapter 4. And our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. Okay, next to that, write the stories. And that's both Bill's stories and the stories in the back of the book. You can just write stories, though. We're going to highlight the ABC. And off to the left, we're going to write program in a nutshell. So go ahead and highlight the ABC. And off to the left, write program in a nutshell. And I know I'm going fast. That we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. After that, write, I will screw it up. I will screw it up. That probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. Let's write, no God, you are screwed. No God, you are screwed. Can't believe it. That's what my sponsor had me write there. That God could and would if he were sought. After that, write the word action. Action. Okay? So, right by the C there, right by C. And then I'm sorry, by the A, write 1. By the B, write 2. And by C, write 3 through 11. Right? 3 through 11. Okay? And then right by the C, write, we are at 82 pages. Okay? And that's counting the Roman numerals and the forewords. And the reason that I'm telling you that we're at 82 pages right now is because we're not at step 3 yet. We've got to get steps 1 and 2 or we can't go forward. If we don't have steps 1 and 2, there's no sense in going forward, right? So we're going to read the original how it works, but let's, where it says being convinced, okay, circle being convinced. And then, convinced of what? Convinced of ABC. And then draw a little arrow out and write, if not convinced, go back and reread from beginning. So if you're not convinced of A, B, and C, or your sponsee is not convinced, you've got to go back and reread from the beginning to this point. Otherwise, there's no sense going on, right? So again, being convinced, we were at step 3, and then you can obviously, step 3 is starting right here. So, all right, you can relax a little bit. We get to have a little fun reading the original. So I'm going to go back to Bill. Now remember, Bill is trying to satisfy everybody with how it works. And he's going, my goodness, we got atheists, we got very religious people. They want this, they want this. They're all of different religions. How in the devil am I gonna write how it works so it's going to work for everybody? And he just could not figure it out, and he didn't know what he was going to do. One night, in utter disgust and frustration, he threw his notepad to the floor. He just threw it down, right? And he prayed and he meditated for about half an hour or so. He picked up his notepad and he started writing. And Bill said it was as if the pencil ran across the page by itself. And in about 20 minutes, he had written how it works. In 20 minutes, he wrote one of the greatest pieces of spiritual instructions that the world has ever known. Now, when Bill numbered the steps, there were 12. Okay, but now what we got to remember is they were based on the Oxford group. So yesterday, before Bill wrote this, there were only 6 steps. Bill wrote it, and now there's 12. So you can write maybe page 263 are 6 steps from the Oxford group, and I'm going to read them real quick. And then I'm going to read another 6 steps, and I don't even know where I got these. But on page 263 of the big book, you've got, so you can find it, you've got complete deflation, dependence and guidance from a higher power, moral inventory, confession, restitution, continued work with other alcoholics. So that was one of the 6-step programs. Another one was admitted hopeless, got honest with self, got honest with another, made amends, help others without demands, prayer to God as you understood Him. So those were like 2 of the 6-step programs, right? So, Bill is like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever, man. Whoa, they're sick. We got 12 steps. This is wonderful. And the other members, he goes, looky, you got to see this. This is so cool. And the other members looked at it and they got pissed. They said, what? It'd be like you got back to your home group and all of a sudden the guy running the meeting said, oh, by the way, we've got 24 steps now, right? So the members did not like it at all. And Bill, this is basically where the stuff started to hit the fan, right? So I'm going to very quickly, I'm going to read, and I'm going to skip around a little bit, but I'm going to read the original, how it works, because they force changes on them, right? So, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our directions, right, instead of our path. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a way of life, used to be a manner of living, which demands rigorous honesty. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to follow directions, right? They didn't like that. It's take certain steps. At some of these, you may balk. You may think you can. You may think you can find an easier, softer way, but we doubt if you can. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil till we let go absolutely. Remember that you are dealing with alcohol, cunning, baffling, and powerful. Without help, it is too much for you. But there is one who has all power. That one is God. You must find him now. Half measures will avail you nothing. You stand at the turning point. Throw yourself under his protection and care with complete abandon. Now we think you can take it. Here are the steps which are suggested as your program of recovery. 1 is the same. 2 is the same. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care and direction of God as we understood him. 4 is the same. 5 is the same. We're entirely willing that God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly on our knees, asked him to remove our shortcomings. Jimmy the atheist didn't like that one. Holding nothing back. Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make complete amends to them all. 9 is the same. 10 is the same. 11 is the same. Having had a spiritual experience, remember Bill had the white light experience, as the result of this course of action. I keep telling people that it's like when you go to the doctor and he gives you the penicillin, it's taking a course of action instead of these steps. We tried to carry this message to others, especially alcoholics, and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Now you may exclaim, what an order, I can't go through with it. Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description of the alcoholic, okay, that's the doctor's opinion, Bill's story, sum in 2 and 3. The chapter to the agnostic, again, chapter 4. And our personal adventures before and after, again, Bill's story and those in the back of the book, have been designed to sell you 3 pertinent ideas. Remember, like me, Bill was a salesman. He's trying to sell this thing, right? A, that you are alcoholic and cannot manage your own life. That's step 1. That probably no human power can relieve your alcoholism. Step 2, that God can and will, right, instead of could and would, that God can and will. And that's the rest of step 2. Okay? Now here, listen to this. If you are not convinced on these vital issues, you ought to reread the book to this point or else throw it away. So he's pretty convinced that if you don't have steps 1 and 2, you cannot go forward from here, right? So his intention was to give us real instructions on how to work these, and they're precise, specific, and clear-cut, right? So a little bit different. So So Bill said, Bill, why did you do that? We like the 6 steps. We don't like this. And Bill, when he was talking, he said, I want to close the loopholes because alcoholics are crafty little devils, and I want to close the loopholes to the alcoholic mind, right? So the people in the fellowship said, Bill, you cannot give directions to alcoholics. They will not take directions. You have to give suggestions. Bill, you can't say you, must. We got to soften this up, Bill. And Bill said, I am not going to change a doggone thing. I ain't changing nothing. And they said, Bill, remember at the outset we agreed that this was to be our book, not your book. And Bill said, yeah, but you guys don't understand, man. I couldn't write this. I had a mental block, and these words came after prayer and meditation. They came directly from God, right? And the other members said, well, we don't give a damn where they came from. They're not going in our book. So they fought back and forth, and this fight almost destroyed the book project, but even more so, it almost destroyed the entire fellowship, right? This fight over how it works. So Bill realized that he had better compromise, or things aren't going to work out. So there was a non-alcoholic psychiatrist in the day, and they deferred to him, and he said, let's change directions to suggestions. Means about the same thing, right? And he said, let's change you to we, must to ought, right? And Bill, he said, well, I'm going to have to go ahead and agree to this. And Bill said, if you know what though, guys, if you want me to finish this book, from here on out, you're going to have to give me the authority to do it the way that I want. I want the final say. And the other member said, well, we can't do that, Bill. There's no way we want to do that. And then he said, then you finish the book. And they deferred, and they gave Bill the authority. And as we see, Bill himself was cunning, baffling, and powerful, because 2 pages later, we've got directions and musts right back in the book. Now, the directions and the must have been in the book up to this point. They pulled them out for how it works over this fight, and then Bill put them right back in 2 pages later. So these really are intended, I think, as a set of directions, right? So being convinced, we were at step 3, right? So, I mean, we're not quite there yet, but we're about to do it, which is that we decided to turn our will and our life over to God as we understood Him. Just what do we mean by this, and just what do we do? Okay, so highlight that last little sentence. Just what do we mean by that, and just what do we do? Okay, then we're going to highlight the next 4 lines. The first requirement, right? And I want you to circle the word requirement, right? I mean, where did that word suggestion go? A requirement is something that must be done. The first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. On that basis, we are almost always in collision with something or somebody, even though our motives are good. Stop highlighting there. Most people try to live by self-propulsion. Each person is like an actor who wants to run the whole show, is forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery, and the rest of the players in his own way. Now at the bottom of the page, let's write, because people are about now, we're going to start to see these coincidences that are happening. So write, it's not odd, it's God. It's not odd, it's God. People are going to start to be noticing things if they are giving this everything that they have right about here. It's like, wow, man, I can't believe that happened. That's weird, right? The rest of the players in his own way. If his arrangements would only stay put, if only people would do as he wished, the show would be great. Everybody, including himself, would be pleased. Life would be wonderful. In trying to make these arrangements, our actor may sometimes be quite virtuous. Let's highlight to the end of the paragraph. He may be kind, considerate, patient, even generous, even modest and self-sacrificing. On the other hand, he may be mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. But as with most humans, he is more likely to have varied traits. Okay, so we're going to write a few things. At the top of the page, let's write 2 essentials for hearing God's will. 2 essentials for hearing God's will, and I'm sure there's a lot more. These are just what I've got written here. 2 essentials for hearing God's will. Live today free of anger and fear. Live today free of anger and fear. And 2, seek prayer and meditation with humility. I guess there's a third one. And 3 is listen to others. So 3 essentials for hearing God's will. Live today free of anger and fear. Seek prayer and meditation with humility. Listen to others. Listen to others. Right? They say God speaks through other people. Right? You hear them in these meetings, things that you need to hear. Okay. So also, next to that on the right here, we're going to write, mind me, right? It's like if you're married, right, and your wife or your husband, why won't they just mind me and do what I want them to do, right? That's the actor trying to get them to do something, right? So what that means is, and you don't need to write this, but it means that the actor wants something, right? They want something. They want love. They want approval. They want people to be on my side. I want you guys to do something for me. And where it says he may be kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest and self-sacrificing, if I can get you to do what I want you to do by being considerate, patient, and generous, guess what, man? I'm going to look good doing it. I'm going to look like a hero, right? And you're not going to see any of my self-centeredness or selfishness because I look so good, right? Next to that one, right in there also, we're going to write, you spot it, you got it. Okay? So you know what that means, because the actor, I can see other people running the show their way, right? Trying to dominate and control everything. And I'm saying to myself, screw them. They're wrong and they're making a mess of things, right? But when I try to do the same thing, when I try to control everything and I try to do the very same exact thing they're doing, I can't see it. I can see it when other people are doing it, but I can't see it when I'm doing it. Because you know why? Because I'm right. My way is the right way. And I am being magnanimous because if they do it my way, everybody's going to be better off, right? But honest to God, when the other person does exactly what I'm doing, they're wrong and they're making a mess of things, right? So that's kind of you spot it, you got it, right? Now, if I can't get it that way, I'm gonna go the other way, right? I'm gonna throw tantrums and do things of that nature. So steps 4 through 10 are designed so that we can see it when we're wrong. They are designed to teach us to see when we're wrong, right? Because I got to tell you guys, I was never wrong until I went through these steps, right? Never wrong. At least, I didn't see it. What usually happens? The show doesn't come off very well. He begins to think life doesn't treat him right. He decides to exert himself more. He becomes on the next occasion still more demanding or gracious, as the case may be. Still the play does not suit him. Admitting he may be, underlined, somewhat at fault, he is sure that other people are more to blame. Right? It's them. Okay? He becomes angry, indignant, self-pitying. Okay, so now off to the right, next to he is sure that other people are more to blame. Write victim in there somewhere. Victim. We're a victim. Doggone it! If they would just do the things the way I want them to do, everything would be fine. Why are they picking on me when I've got the right way to do things, right? So we are gonna, he becomes angry, indignant, self-pitying. Okay, next to that paragraph, let's write, that we're about to read, write 6 questions of self-delusion. 6 questions of self-delusion. And then after delusion, in parentheses, write will. Right? Will. Or self-will, if you will. 6 questions of self-delusion, parentheses, will. We're going to label them, and then on the bottom of the page, we're going to write the number, and in very small print, we're going to write the translation. Okay? So put a 1 in front of what? That's the first question. What is his basic trouble? Okay, so we put a 1 in front of that. And I just added this today because that is kind of a rhetorical question. But put a 1 down below and write, victim blames others. I mean, there's other things too, because there's a lot of them. But victim blames others. What is his basic trouble? Also, of course, controlling, but that'll come up on some of these other ones. Put a 2 in front of is. Is he not really a self-seeker even when trying to be kind? Okay, so then write a 2 down at the bottom, the translation. Look good in front of others, right? So I am going to try to get you to do what I want you to do by being very soft-spoken, very kind, and very convincing to try to get you to do it, right? Look good in front of others. Because if I'm yelling and screaming, I'm not going to look good. Put a 3 in front of is. Is he not a victim of the delusion that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if he only manages well? Okay, so we're gonna put a 3 at the bottom. Manipulate situations to my advantage. Manipulate situations to my advantage. And if I can do that, I am going to get that satisfaction I really want. But we're just going to write manipulate situations to my advantage. We're going to put a 4 in front of is. Is it not evident to all the rest of the players that these are the things he wants? Okay, translation 4 at the bottom. You can just write King Baby, right? If I was king, everything would be great, or King Baby, right? If you've ever read that pamphlet. If I was king, everything okay.